The morning sun barely touched the tall windows of Buckingham Palace when Captain James Morrison received the most shocking order of his 20-year career. His hands trembled slightly as he read the sealed document that would change everything the royal family thought they knew about their own bloodline. "Assemble your most trusted men immediately," the Queen's private secretary had whispered urgently in the dimly lit corridor. "This matter requires absolute discretion and complete secrecy." Captain Morrison had served the crown faithfully through countless ceremonies, state visits, and security threats, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to discover. The intelligence report in his hands spoke of a missing royal heir, a child who had vanished without a trace 15 years ago during a carefully orchestrated deception. The story began to unfold 3 months earlier, when a dying woman named Margaret Thornfield appeared at the gates of Windsor Castle. She clutched a worn leather briefcase and demanded to speak with someone in authority. The guards initially dismissed her as another confused citizen seeking attention, but something in her desperate eyes made them hesitate. Margaret had been a trusted nanny to the royal family for over 30 years. She had cared for princes and princesses, witnessed their first steps, and dried their tears during childhood struggles. But on her deathbed, she carried a secret so devastating that it could shake the very foundation of the monarchy. "I know where the lost prince is," she had whispered to the Queen's closest advisor. "I helped hide him, and I can no longer live with this burden." The briefcase contained photographs, documents, and a detailed confession that painted a picture of conspiracy and betrayal within the palace walls. According to Margaret's account, a male heir born to a minor royal family member had been secretly removed from the line of succession 15 years ago. The child's existence had been erased from all official records, and his identity had been carefully concealed to protect certain powerful interests within the royal circle. The investigation that followed Margaret's revelation was swift and thorough. Private detectives, loyal to the crown, spent weeks following paper trails and interviewing former palace staff members who had worked during that crucial period. What they discovered was a web of lies that reached into the highest levels of royal administration. The missing heir, according to the evidence, was now a 16-year-old young man living under a completely different identity. He had been placed with a middle-class family who believed they were simply providing a home for an orphaned child. The boy himself had no knowledge of his true heritage or the royal blood that flowed through his veins. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. The investigation pointed to someone very close to the current royal family as the architect of this elaborate cover-up. Someone who had the power, influence, and motive to orchestrate such a complex deception without detection. Captain Morrison studied the surveillance photographs that had been gathered over recent weeks. They showed a confident teenager with distinctive features that bore an unmistakable resemblance to the royal bloodline. The same strong jawline, the same penetrating eyes, and the same natural bearing that seemed to command respect without effort. The boy attended a private school in the countryside, excelled in his studies, and showed natural leadership qualities that his classmates and teachers admired. He played rugby with passion, studied history with genuine interest, and carried himself with an unconscious dignity that set him apart from his peers. None of them suspected that they were in the presence of someone who should rightfully be among the most important young people in the entire kingdom. As the evidence mounted, it became clear that the person responsible for hiding the royal heir was someone who had constant access to the inner workings of the palace. Someone who could manipulate records, influence decisions, and control information without raising suspicion. Someone who had been trusted completely by the royal family for many years. The investigation team worked carefully to avoid alerting their target while they gathered the final pieces of evidence. They monitored phone calls, tracked financial transactions, and documented every movement of the person they suspected of orchestrating this incredible deception. Captain Morrison knew that once they moved forward with their plan, there would be no turning back. The revelation would send shockwaves through the entire royal establishment and potentially create a constitutional crisis unlike anything the monarchy had faced in modern times. The decision was made to conduct a surprise raid on the private quarters of the suspected conspirator. This would be the only way to gather the remaining evidence needed to prove the case beyond any doubt. The operation would need to be swift, thorough, and completely unexpected to prevent any attempt to destroy evidence or escape justice. The target of their investigation was someone whose name alone would cause scandal and disbelief throughout the kingdom. Someone whose public image was carefully crafted to project loyalty, dedication, and unwavering service to the crown. Someone whose private actions, however, told a very different story. As Captain Morrison prepared his team for the most important mission of their careers, he reflected on the irony of the situation. They were about to expose a conspiracy that had successfully hidden a royal prince in plain sight for 15 years. The same institution they had sworn to protect was about to discover that it had been betrayed from within by someone they had trusted implicitly. The young man at the center of this incredible story continued his normal teenage life, completely unaware that his world was about to change forever. He attended classes, spent time with friends, and made plans for his future, never imagining that his true destiny lay within the walls of palaces and the corridors of power he had never seen. The evidence suggested that the conspiracy went deeper than anyone had initially imagined. There were hints of financial motives, political calculations, and personal vendettas that had influenced the decision to hide the royal heir. The full truth would only emerge when they finally confronted the person responsible and forced them to reveal the complete scope of their deception. Captain Morrison checked his watch and realized that in just a few hours, his team would be knocking on a door that concealed secrets powerful enough to rewrite royal history. The missing prince would finally be found, and justice would finally be served. But the cost of these revelations would be measured in more than just scandal and embarrassment. The monarchy itself would need to confront the reality that one of its most trusted members had committed an act of betrayal so profound that it challenged everything they believed about loyalty, duty, and family bonds. The missing heir represented not just a lost prince, but a lost piece of the royal soul that had been hidden away in darkness for far too long. The clock struck midnight when Captain Morrison led his elite team through the servants' corridors of Clarence House. Their footsteps echoed softly against the ancient stone floors as they approached their target destination. Each guard carried specialized equipment designed to breach secured doors and collect evidence without causing unnecessary damage to the historic building. The private quarters they were approaching belonged to Camilla, the queen consort, whose relationship with the royal family had always been complicated by public opinion and private controversies. But the evidence gathered over recent weeks suggested that her involvement in the missing heir conspiracy went far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Intelligence reports indicated that crucial documents and possibly even personal items belonging to the lost prince were hidden somewhere within her private chambers. The investigation team had spent days studying architectural plans and security protocols to ensure their raid would be thorough but respectful of the dignity expected in such circumstances. Captain Morrison's radio crackled softly as his surveillance team confirmed that Camilla was attending a late-night charity event across the city. This provided the perfect window of opportunity to conduct their search without confrontation or advance warning that might lead to evidence being destroyed or moved. The first door they encountered was protected by an electronic lock system that recorded every entry and exit. The technical specialist on Morrison's team worked quickly to bypass the security without triggering any alarms that might alert other palace staff to their presence. Within minutes, they had gained access to the outer chambers of what many considered to be forbidden territory. The private quarters were decorated with expensive artwork and antique furniture that reflected decades of careful collection and refined taste. Persian rugs covered polished wooden floors, and crystal chandeliers cast elegant shadows across cream-colored walls adorned with family portraits and formal photographs from state occasions. But Captain Morrison and his team were not interested in the obvious luxury that surrounded them. They were searching for hidden compartments, secret drawers, and concealed safes that might contain evidence of the conspiracy that had stolen 15 years from a royal prince's life. The search began systematically in the main sitting room, where the team used specialized equipment to scan walls for hollow spaces and floors for concealed storage areas. They photographed everything before moving or examining it, ensuring that no detail would be overlooked and that they could restore everything to its original position if necessary. In an ornate writing desk positioned near the window overlooking the palace gardens, they discovered the first significant clue. Hidden beneath a false bottom in the largest drawer was a collection of handwritten letters tied together with a blue ribbon. The letters were addressed to various government officials and bore dates corresponding to the time period when the royal heir had disappeared. One letter in particular caught Captain Morrison's attention. It was written on official royal stationery and contained detailed instructions for removing all traces of a specific birth certificate from government records. The letter was signed with initials that could only belong to someone with extraordinary influence over official documentation processes. As the team continued their search, they uncovered additional evidence that painted a picture of careful planning and systematic cover-up. Financial records hidden in a locked jewelry box showed large payments made to individuals whose names appeared on the investigation team's list of people connected to the missing heir case. The bedroom revealed even more damaging evidence. Behind a portrait of the royal family that hung above an antique dressing table, they found a concealed wall safe. The combination lock had been recently changed, suggesting that someone was still actively managing whatever secrets lay inside. The safe opening required delicate work by their technical specialist, but when the heavy door finally swung open, the contents exceeded even Captain Morrison's expectations. Inside were dozens of photographs showing the missing prince at various stages of his childhood and adolescence. Someone had been secretly monitoring his life and documenting his growth without his knowledge or the knowledge of his adoptive family. The photographs were accompanied by detailed reports from private investigators who had been paid to observe the young man's education, friendships, and personal development. The reports contained intimate details about his personality, his academic achievements, and even his romantic interests. It was clear that someone had been maintaining close surveillance of the royal heir while publicly denying his very existence. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. At the bottom of the safe, wrapped in tissue paper and protected by a small wooden box, was a birth certificate bearing the royal seal. The document clearly identified the missing young man as a legitimate member of the royal bloodline, with his parentage officially recorded and legally recognized. Attached to the birth certificate was a handwritten note explaining why the heir's identity had been concealed. The note revealed a complex web of jealousy, political calculation, and personal ambition that had motivated someone to steal a child's royal heritage for their own purposes. According to the note, certain individuals within the royal circle had feared that the missing heir's eventual claim to succession rights would threaten their own position and influence within the monarchy. They had orchestrated his disappearance to protect their own interests and ensure that future royal succession would follow a path more favorable to their personal ambitions. Captain Morrison realized that they had uncovered evidence of a conspiracy that went beyond simple family drama or personal conflicts. This was a calculated attempt to manipulate the line of royal succession for political and personal gain, and it involved people at the very highest levels of royal administration. The search of the private quarters continued for several more hours as the team methodically examined every possible hiding place. They discovered additional correspondence with government officials, financial institutions, and legal representatives who had unknowingly participated in the conspiracy by processing false documents and maintaining fraudulent records. One particularly damaging piece of evidence was a recorded conversation on a small digital device hidden inside a decorative music box. The recording captured detailed discussions about the logistics of maintaining the cover-up and the ongoing efforts to prevent the missing heir from ever discovering his true identity. The voice on the recording belonged to someone the investigation team recognized immediately. It was clear, authoritative, and completely confident in discussing the illegal actions that had been taken to conceal the royal heir's existence. The recording provided undeniable proof of direct involvement in the conspiracy and would serve as crucial evidence in any legal proceedings that might follow. As dawn approached, Captain Morrison's team had gathered enough evidence to prove their case beyond any reasonable doubt. The private quarters had yielded a treasure trove of documentation, correspondence, and recorded conversations that exposed the full scope of the conspiracy to hide the missing royal heir. But perhaps the most significant discovery was a detailed plan for the heir's eventual reintroduction to royal life. The documents suggested that the conspirators had always intended to reveal the young man's identity at some point, but only when it would serve their own purposes and after they had secured their own position within the royal hierarchy. The plan outlined specific steps for gradually introducing the heir to royal duties and responsibilities, while ensuring that certain individuals would maintain influence over his education and decision-making processes. It was a calculated attempt to eventually use the missing prince as a puppet for their own political and personal ambitions. As Captain Morrison prepared to conclude the raid and secure all evidence for analysis, he reflected on the magnitude of what they had uncovered. The conspiracy to hide the royal heir was not just a crime against the monarchy, but a theft of identity, heritage, and destiny that had robbed a young man of 15 years of his rightful life. The evidence they had gathered would soon expose the truth and bring justice to those responsible, but it would also create a constitutional crisis that would challenge the very foundations of public trust in the royal institution. The missing prince would finally be found, but the revelation would come at a cost that no one could have fully anticipated. The evidence room at Scotland Yard had never contained materials more sensitive or potentially explosive than the boxes of documents, photographs, and recordings that Captain Morrison's team delivered at sunrise. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Williams, specially assigned to handle matters of national security, personally oversaw the cataloging and analysis of every piece of evidence recovered from the raid. The recorded conversations proved to be the most damaging elements of the case. Clear voices discussed the practical details of maintaining a 15-year conspiracy with casual indifference to the moral and legal implications of their actions. The recordings revealed not just the scope of the deception, but the calculated coldness with which it had been planned and executed. Within hours of the evidence analysis beginning, arrest warrants were prepared for 3 individuals who had been directly involved in concealing the royal heir's identity. The warrants included charges of fraud, conspiracy, falsification of official documents, and violation of succession laws that carried serious criminal penalties. But before any arrests could be made, the royal family itself needed to be informed of the shocking discoveries. The Queen was awakened at her private residence and briefed on the evidence by her most trusted advisors. The revelation that someone so close to the family had orchestrated such an elaborate deception left her speechless for several long minutes. The missing heir, meanwhile, continued his normal routine, completely unaware that his entire world was about to change forever. He attended his morning classes at boarding school, participated in rugby practice, and studied for upcoming examinations. never imagining that detectives were preparing to transform him from an ordinary teenager into a recognized member of the royal family. The plan for revealing his true identity had to be handled with extraordinary care. Child psychologists and royal protocol experts worked together to develop an approach that would minimize trauma while respecting the magnitude of the revelation. The young man would need time to process the information and professional support to help him understand the implications of his royal heritage. His adoptive parents also needed to be informed before the public announcement. They had raised him with love and dedication for 15 years, believing they were simply providing a home for an orphaned child. The revelation that he was actually a missing royal heir would devastate them emotionally and legally complicate their parental relationship. The first arrest was made quietly at dawn 3 days after the raid. Camilla was taken into custody at her private residence while attempting to board a flight to Switzerland. In her luggage, investigators found additional evidence, including financial records, showing numbered bank accounts and correspondence with foreign legal representatives who had been preparing to help her establish residency outside British jurisdiction. Her arrest sent immediate shockwaves through the palace and prompted emergency meetings among the highest levels of royal administration. The conspiracy had reached deeper into the royal household than anyone had imagined, and the investigation expanded to examine the possible involvement of other family members and trusted advisors. The missing heir was finally approached by specially trained royal representatives while he was alone in his dormitory room after evening study hours. They identified themselves carefully and explained that they had information about his family background that required private discussion. The conversation took place in the presence of school counselors and child welfare specialists to ensure his emotional well-being was protected. When the truth about his royal heritage was revealed, the young man's initial reaction was complete disbelief, followed by overwhelming confusion. He had always known he was adopted, but had never questioned the story about his parents dying in an automobile accident when he was an infant. The idea that he was actually a member of the royal family seemed impossible to comprehend. The revelation was supported by DNA evidence that had been quietly collected and analyzed during the investigation. The genetic testing confirmed beyond any doubt that he was indeed the missing royal heir whose disappearance had been covered up for 15 years. The scientific proof helped him begin to accept the incredible truth about his identity. Over the following days, the young man was gradually introduced to his biological royal relatives and began learning about the heritage and responsibilities that came with his birthright. The process was carefully managed by child psychologists who specialized in helping young people cope with dramatic life changes and identity revelations. His adoptive parents were devastated by the news, but ultimately supportive of his need to explore his royal heritage and assume his rightful place in the line of succession. They had loved him as their own son for 15 years and wanted whatever would make him happiest, even if it meant sharing him with the royal family and the demands of public life. The public announcement of the discovered heir created a media sensation that dominated international news coverage for weeks. The story of a hidden royal prince captured public imagination and raised serious questions about transparency and accountability within the monarchy. Opinion polls showed that while many people were fascinated by the romantic aspects of the story, others were deeply concerned about the institutional failures that had allowed such a conspiracy to succeed. Legal proceedings against those involved in the conspiracy moved forward swiftly through the courts. The evidence was overwhelming, and the defendants faced the prospect of lengthy prison sentences for their crimes against the crown and their theft of a young man's royal identity. The investigation revealed that the conspiracy had been motivated primarily by concerns about succession order and personal ambition within the royal circle. Certain individuals had feared that the missing heir's legitimate claims would threaten their own position and influence, leading them to orchestrate his disappearance through falsified documents and bribed officials. The young prince, as he was now officially recognized, began the challenging process of adapting to royal life while continuing his education and maintaining relationships with his adoptive family. Special tutors were assigned to help him learn royal protocol, constitutional law, and the historical context of his heritage and responsibilities. Public opinion about his situation was generally sympathetic, with most people expressing outrage at those who had stolen his royal identity and admiration for his dignity in handling such extraordinary circumstances. His natural intelligence and leadership qualities, which had always impressed his teachers and classmates, seemed even more remarkable when viewed in the context of his royal bloodline. The constitutional implications of his restoration to the line of succession required careful legal analysis and legislative review. Parliamentary experts worked to ensure that his rights were properly recognized while addressing the complex legal questions created by 15 years of fraudulent documentation and false identity. The missing heir's return to royal status also prompted broader reforms in royal administration designed to prevent similar conspiracies in the future. New oversight procedures, documentation requirements, and security measures were implemented to protect the integrity of succession records and ensure transparency in royal family matters. As the criminal trials concluded and the conspirators faced justice for their crimes, the young prince began to find his place within the royal family and the broader constitutional framework of the monarchy. His story became a powerful reminder that truth, no matter how long concealed, eventually emerges to restore justice and right the wrongs of the past. The palace that had once hidden his identity now welcomed him home as a rightful heir, and the kingdom that had been denied his presence for 15 years finally had the opportunity to witness the return of their missing prince to his proper place in the royal family.